I got 6 o'clock, I'll be in order. Just getting everything pulled up here. Matt, I think we'll just start with you, right?
All right, you bet. So it's been since November, since we've heard from everybody, so I'm sure that they all have lots of precious nuggets to share. So let's get started with that. Let's see, Mary, do you want to go first?
Sure.
All right, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you all. We'll start with the traditional kudos. So kudos to our staff for working together to make the transition with our kids returning to our schools a very smooth one. Kudos to our families for being supportive of the ebb and the flow that we've been through so far this year. For some of us, it's our 5th learning model. For others, it's 6th, speaking of our 5th grade friends. And kudos to all of us for keeping the kids at the center of all the choices that we make and understanding and focusing on what's best for them. Our rolling start student return, as you know, began last Monday with our pre-K students. It was fantastic to walk down the halls and hear the buzz and the giggles and some of the games that they were playing. Our K through 2nd graders began yesterday, and that as well is wonderful. The teachers are thrilled to have everybody back, and it's good to see the level of energy that our kiddos are bringing to us. Our 3rd through 5th graders come back next week. At this point, we still have 35 children who will be remote learning. 7 of them are remote learning right now because of quarantine. So we have 28 that are going to be remote learning. We haven't heard at this point from any families who are choosing to remote learn because we're switching back to 4 days. So there have been no change in those numbers based upon moving back to 4 days. We are working on using our winter benchmarking data to inform our instruction moving forward. And you've seen the PowerPoint that talks a little bit about student achievement that Matt shared. I think it's actually called student achievement. And that's where we're comparing our data from last year to this year. So I'll go into more detail about what all of that data means at that point in today's meeting. A highlight for us, because of our 7 mindset acts of kindness way back in November, our teachers got together and decided to sponsor some Manor residents. So each of our classrooms has 2 to 3 residents at Coronis Manor. The classroom kiddos and teachers work together to email, to print letters, to color, to write letters, to sing songs, to do presentations, and then share them with our resident buddies. So that's been just a real thrill to get the feedback from the residents and from the staff over at the Manor. It's really nice to pay it forward and build those connections. Coming forward, in January, we have a tentative DARE graduation set. We have our SAD coat collection. That, of course, was canceled because of the pandemic. So we're going to do a co-worker coat collection at the elementary where the staff are going to team up with a challenge to bring in coats in. February brings us I Love to Read Month. We'll have mystery readers. We'll have a teacher swap. We'll do lots of stop, drop, and read. And then in March, we do our food shelf drive. So things are unraveling very fast and lining up at the very same time at the elementary. A wonderful place to be. Again, thank you for your support and the support from our family and staff, making this the best place we can for our junior Bulldogs. It's awesome. Do you have any questions?
I just thought of one.
Yes.
I know we couldn't do it the way we normally would, but in the fall, they always did the eye and ear check.
Yes.
Have we been able to do anything with the kids or?
We are doing hearing and vision checks with our preschool friends as they come through and go through the screening process. And Ms. Brown does the screening checks for kiddos who demonstrate some struggles, but we haven't done grade level yet.
You haven't, okay.
Right.
I didn't know if there was a way that could be done or not. Just,
Moving forward, hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
Good question.
Any other questions for Mary? All right, we'll see you in a bit. Thanks, Mary.
Yeah.
Mr. Orline, David, you're up.
All right, well, good evening. Yeah, again, I want to thank our staff. You know, we're in a position where most schools are trying to get where we're at by bringing kids back, and we're already there. And so the fact that we have been able to have our kids at least 2 days a week for this entire school year has really been a blessing for us. So we are also excited to start to bring back our middle school students 4 days a week. And our plan is to start that on January 26th after the quarter break day. We currently have one student in sixth grade that is full remote, 3 students in seventh grade, and 10 students in eighth grade. And we haven't had any, we really haven't had any phone calls with movement in that. And so we'll start to get communication out to our remote families, just to see if there's gonna be a change, and also any of our other families, if they are gonna choose to go remote, in our middle school grades, will have that information so that we can plan accordingly for that. So we are adding a significant number of students into our building for second semester, about 103 kids. And so we're working through classes in our second semester, third quarter, looking at numbers and working with teachers to either make those rooms more accommodating for more students, or looking for an alternative classroom for that period. So we're in the early stages of that. I'm hoping to be able to meet with most of the teachers by the end of the week and start working on a plan. Been working with Lori in the kitchen, and what we're probably gonna do is, right now we have a sixth grade lunch, and then we have a seventh and eighth grade lunch. We'll probably end up splitting, so seventh grade and eighth grade will have different lunches so that we can maintain the numbers that we have. We'll continue to just kind of work on the social distancing and how we're using our lockers and things like that as we continue to bring more kids back in the building, but we're excited about that. So we're also planning for what our daily schedule would look like next year, and whether to have 4 classes or 8 classes or somewhere in the middle. And so we have a group of teachers that have met and started the discussion with that. We did a survey with staff about 2 months ago probably, and overwhelmingly staff were interested in exploring 4 classes instead of 8, with modifications and things that we're learning about that. We'll find out more information on how that's going when third quarter starts, because it'll be classes that some of those year-long classes that students had first quarter, they'll have again third quarter. And so we'll kind of see how that shakes out. Tomorrow morning, our students in grades 7 through 11 will get a survey from me, and it will just to gather some basic information about the daily schedule and some things and what they prefer and what they think is working in that schedule, what they think we need to look at adjusting, and just to gather some more data. So we'll have that'll go out tomorrow morning. We are working on a credit recovery program here. We haven't really had anything after school for our high school kids. We've done some summer school things, and so right now the plan is that we have a couple English teachers who are going to do an after-school night school, and we're working out the details on that with the hopes to start third quarter or a week after that. And so that would be a kind of a general English class where students who are behind on required credits for that area can take a class and get some credits that way. And we think that having our teachers teach it is really going to be something that will help, with attendance and just getting those students in and making it more personable than sitting in front of a computer collecting seat time. Math, we actually have a class like that prepared for third quarter. And so we're able to put students that are behind in math credits, or where our tracks just aren't working for those students. And so that will be that's a class that'll start with Mr. Heimerman's going to be teaching that, and that'll start third quarter. And science, we just met last Friday to talk about that, and if we can't get that going third quarter, we'll do our best to get it going for fourth quarter. Since a quarter can get us a semester credit, we think that we can maybe eliminate some of the need for summer school for some of our students. And then if this is successful, it would be our goal to keep our students here for those classes instead of having to send them to Melrose or one of the other schools within the West Central Ed. So we're working on that. We're also working on registration guide, again, looking at our classes and seeing what was popular and what adjustments we can make and how we can offer our classes to reflect the learning models that we've been using since last March and how we can, because there are students that definitely thrive in the model, in one of the models that we're offering now, and how can we provide that for our students and not just go back to where we're doing everything in the classroom. So we're looking at being creative in some of those areas. We have Sweet Fest. We're preparing for that for middle of February, trying to come up with ways to make that something that is memorable for students and also trying to do it in a safe manner. So there'll be more updates on that. Any questions for me?
I don't know who to address it to, but I was just wondering how the facilitators are working out, if they're overwhelmed or if they're doing okay, if the kids are responsive to them or calling in to get their help. I just wondered how the facilitators are doing.
What do you mean for that?
The ones that, the people that we hired to help the students that are having trouble with remote learning.
Oh, like Veronia?
Sure.
Veronia.
Yep.
Yeah, so actually, Veronia focused mostly on the elementary for the first half of the year. And on last Friday, she came in and met with our middle school teachers and kind of introduced what she's gonna be doing and how she can, offer her assistance. And so she's already working with middle school teachers on those students. Mostly, the plan was that she would concentrate on students that were fully remote, but with us being in the hybrid and having the end of the quarter coming up pretty soon, so she's gonna focus on any students that teachers feel could use that extra boost. And I will say on Fridays, every Friday we have more kids in this building, and we have so many things going on. I'm working personally with a couple students who I'm scheduling them with teachers so they can be here from 8 to noon. And there's just a lot of action going on. And I think a lot of our teachers are really recognizing that that's a great time to be working with our students, whether it's in person or remote, more on a one-to-one basis. But so that's part of where we're offering some of that assistance too.
But she's able to keep up.
Oh, she's doing a great job, yeah.
Well, I assumed she would do a great job. I wasn't worried about that.
She's really organized and our students are really doing a remarkable job of, kind of thriving in both the remote and the in-person. And so we're really proud of how our students have been doing, so.
Thank you.
And then working as a team from an elementary perspective, the teams work really well with Veronia to reach out and identify those concerns for the kiddos that aren't engaging with her, to find out what we can do. Is it a family issue? Is it a connectivity issue? Is it a choice by the student? So, luckily she's got kid gloves and a good mindset about how we can get the kids re-engaged. So it's been working very well.
Great.
Also, before I finish, I don't know that Jonah Johnson and Garrett Grace get enough kudos for all that they do with the technology and the system they have for getting things repaired and the amount of time they spend making sure that all of our families have access to internet and handling those problems. We've had very few consistent internet issues. We've always been able to resolve them. And so they've done just a great job, and I don't think they've been recognized lately, so.
I have a question about registration. So I know like last year, I mean, it's a challenge in the COVID environment, but we have such full classes and the challenge has been how are kids aware of the classes and opportunities?
Yeah.
Is there something different we're trying this year? Like, do kids get a test out of class or, I mean, how are we kind of exposing traditional students to non-traditional classes, things like that?
Yeah, we last year, we just kind of had to rush to get
Yeah.
kids done before the middle of March. And so our goal this year is to really break into small groups with students and meet with them and talk about the different offerings. Actually have an email from Greg Flint from Cold Spring Granite asking about planning for next year and things. So, you know, we have, part of the issue too is we want other schools to come in and take some of our classes too, but those schools hadn't started the registration process before we had to end the school year last year. And so we have very few students coming into this building taking classes, but we want to work on making that more of a two-way street. But yeah, we want to spend more time talking about what we're offering and what it means to take a 0-hour class or a hybrid class. And I think we've learned a lot in understanding which students are able to thrive in all these different areas. And so I think that will really help us as we start to kind of steer students in a direction or in a model, or getting them to take a chance on something because they've shown us that they could be successful in something that is unique and different. And so, yeah, we want to try to be more just informative on what we have, and that'll be our goal.
Thank you.
Any other questions for David? All right, thanks,
Thank you.
David. Max?
Well, our activities are up and going. Many of them restarted on January 4th. Some of them continued to do things virtually even during the pause. Our One Act Play decided that they wanted to do all virtual stuff. All of the production has all been done virtually, and they're going to continue with that. That contest is actually going to be all virtual, so there's no in-person performance for that. Today I ordered scripts for the middle school play. Want to recognize the AAA, which is the Academics, Arts, and Athletics Award for excellence in those three areas. The award winners from Paynesville, and representing us in Sub-District 20 is Erica Gaby and Evan Lanning. So congratulations to those two. Normally we would honor those two individuals at the last home basketball game of the year to kick off music in our schools. Our entire choir would sing the national anthem, and then we would also recognize those people, and that was a nice way to do that. I'm not sure what we're going to do at this point in time. Started, Matt, if you could pull up the school website. All of the changes in scheduling and all of my anxiety of wondering if I communicated everything that's out there and what's going on, decided to start what we're calling the Bulldog Schedule and sending it out on a weekly time. It's actually right there, the week of 1/11/21 is just a working document that will go out on Friday to the week prior. And so it's essentially just a link to this document. So if I have any kind of changes, I can edit that, put the live stream links in as they become available, because we have, Matt Dickhausen does a good job with ours, Paynesville Studios. Most of the time our live stream link will remain the same, but sometimes they change or they're different URLs. And so that is going to be sent out as well in Mr. Orline's newsletter weekly. And so there's just a lot of logistical changes that go on with all of this stuff, and especially things that you just took for granted that you can communicate with kids on a daily basis when they're in the building, and now sometimes they're not. So even when you have a home event, for instance, students weren't necessarily in attendance, if you will, but they're attending virtually and then they have to come in. So just wanted to create something that we can get out to people that they can check the most latest up to date. Obviously, people who are involved in basketball, for instance, they can look at the whole entire schedule, but this is a week snapshot of what's going on.
Is there a way for like community members to subscribe to that email that goes out? Okay, that's fine. I was just curious as
I'm
grandparents or.
I'm shaking my head no, but I also think it's a question that we just need to maybe pose to some other people, some of the vendors that we're working with.
Just that like grandparents or people might be interested in,
Because
because it's changing so frequently, but.
well, one thing that we possibly could do, I'm not sure how often Matt Dickhausen puts out his newsletter. It might not be weekly like Mr. Orline's at the high school. We did send out to all families K through 12, even the elementary school, because we wanted those families to know what's going on with our activities. And then we will push that, Miranda in the district office is gonna always push to make sure that it doesn't get buried in the news, so it remains. And then again, if we can just drive traffic, and it's something that I would envision that we would continue to do even post COVID-19 pandemic times, just to keep it up there. So essentially, if they have access to the high school or to the Paynesville school website, they can pull it up and get that document right there.
One thing I would add is, I do believe, and Matt probably knows this better than I, but if you have the Paynesville Schools app on your smartphone, you can ask to turn on notifications for news and announcements. And then anytime there's a new news article that would go up, you would get notified. So whenever that gets posted on the website, each and every week that hits on that Friday, they would get that notification through the school app if they have our school district app.
Really, yeah, we just want to spread the word to go to there. We're gonna try to make it consistent and use it because we want to get that information out. So spectators has kind of been a hot topic that we've been dealing with both as a conference and as our school. What are we doing with fans? Essentially right now, in Paynesville, any of our home activities inside of our building are gonna be limited to 2 spectators per participant for home fans only, primarily due to just the space issues that we have to follow the guidance of the Minnesota Department of Health. We just physically don't have the space to be able to bring the capacity in. Logistics have changed. You look at the bench for a basketball team and those players are supposed to be sitting 6 feet apart. Well, that now takes some of the bleacher section away where the visiting section would normally be. Fans are supposed to be 12 feet away from playing surface. Well, for volleyball, that was okay to have fans down closer to the end of the bleachers because the court is smaller inside, but for basketball, it's not the case. And so we just, it's really gonna be, see what happens in January as we go, and it'll be revisited in February. What we've communicated out, and we're asking our families to understand if they have somebody in activities that if we know that there's visiting fans for any activity, that information would be driven from the players to their families through the coaches. So for instance, we belong to a completely different conference for hockey, and so some of those events in our arenas are going to be allowed to have visiting fans and so on and so forth. So it's just based on somewhat who we play and what the local decision is at those schools. One neat thing that we did this fall was we added a device in our high school gym for volleyball and basketball so that we can record practices, and as well it allows for live streaming to take place. So we are gonna be able to live stream all of the events that take place. Our basketball programs actually use it to videotape their practices, and but we're gonna be able to live stream all of the events in our high school gym, JV and varsity basketball. Even if the Paynesville Studios or Matt's BNC program's not there, just picks it up on the camera and follows the motion. We're gonna be able to do that. Excited about that. If you're unaware, the Paynesville Wrestling Club, which is a separate organization outside of our school but runs youth wrestling, had signed a lease to lease the Shopco facility to run youth wrestling there. We're thankful to generous community members who own that, who essentially leased it for the price of the utilities. Our high school wrestling program and middle school as well has used that just due to the fact that the space is just much larger than our current wrestling room. And the wrestlers were back in the wrestling room on Friday because of different things that were going on scheduling wise, and the preferred location is over at Chapco. And I will tell you that the layout of those mats is the exact same size as what our new wrestling room is. So that's gonna be such a good addition to our school as well. We do currently have an opening for head softball, so we're actively looking for a head softball coach. And that's what's taking place in activities. I don't know if anybody has any questions for me. I used to feel like I'd have the schedules memorized. I don't know if I have them all memorized anymore.
It seems to be a regular moving target. So I can see it everywhere that you're dealing with, that there's nothing that's consistent for a long period of time. It's a little hard to have it all in the back of your head then.
And it might change next week.
Yeah.
We offer a lot of activities in the winter in comparison to what's offered in the fall. You know, I've shared with Mr. Bullard that in the fall, if we had an activity that was taking place, it was essentially the only one that we really had going on in Paynesville, or we just offer an awful lot, as you saw by that document. And so it's just to try to make sure that we do the very best, and you really can't go down the hall and communicate directly with every student anymore. So it's causing us to grow, hopefully.
Any other questions for Max? All right, thank you much. Matt, Committee Ed.
All right, good evening, everyone. Piggybacking on what Max talked about, the moving target, and it makes planning community ed activities pretty difficult. So we're still we can't have any outside people in the building, so that's limited some things, but we continue to try to offer what we can and be creative. So we're moving forward at this time for a full traditional summer program. That's what we're hoping and planning for. So cross our fingers, I guess. So pause report, that too, ECP's been going well for our Fridays. It's great to have the students back now, the elementary students. A majority of our pause kids are pre-K through 2. So almost all those kids now, of course, are back in school. So that's going well. We're planning a summer program, hopefully to a traditional summer pause program this year. Preschool report, 2021-22 preschool will open in mid-March. And will be something new this year. We'll be giving early registration access to our current ECFE families. Just to encourage those families as kind of an incentive that they're spending that time with ECFE. So those 3-year-olds will have early access to our preschool program. Fitness center, we were.
The question, preschool, are we running still into issues where we're capping out, or do you think most families will be able to be counted?
I think most families will still be able to make it. We track the census pretty well. So next year there's a dip from this year. This year's, I think we were at like 77 or something for the 4-year-olds eligible. Next year is gonna be, I think I said 62 or something like that, so.
Okay, so it's not that families will potentially miss out.
No, it's an incentive. They may get, the morning session is often more popular, but we did not fill up this year. We had, but then you always have some transition, so we haven't turned any kids away from high school. So good question though. Fitness center, this has been a rough year for us. I mean, we've lost a lot of members. We had an uptake when the weather was getting colder. And we were kind of getting some momentum, people coming back, and then that last shutdown really affected us. And now with the mask, every week I'm getting quite a few cancellations. So I just keep holding out hope for when we have this new facility. We're already planning lots of new activities and new things to do. The walking track, the group exercise, I think next year is just gonna be, off the charts for us, but we continue to hang on. Live stream, Max talked a little bit about our broadcast season. Our next episode of the Talk of Paynesville is next Monday. We have Officer Tom Fred and his canine partner Jerry as our guests. And then our first winter athletic broadcast will be next Tuesday, the 19th, for our first wrestling match at home. Then I think we have a basketball game later that week too. And then again, we just keep planning for the new community center, the new PAC. We can't wait. I sneak in there unofficially on the weekends, and that's where those pictures of the green were this week on the news on the website. So it's pretty exciting time. So questions for me?
I do have a question, but it's a little bit loaded. And
I appreciate you letting us know
I'm looking
that.
at the next one on COVID-19. So, but I'm listening to Max and I'm listening to you, and I was reading on the vaccination process. And one of the first groups, once the intense people are done, is gonna be 65 and older. A lot of who participate in some of what you do, they like to watch sports, and they're vaccinated. Are we gonna have a time where that person is going to be allowed to be, I just don't know. I mean, I can't even find out, and I have not been able to find out, that it appears to be 14 days after the second shot. The 65-year-olds are gonna get it pretty quick here, which means that you're gonna be still maybe in this season with, and I understand they might give you a card. So they're gonna have a card, they're fully vaccinated, they've hit their days. Are they then safe to come in? Do we require a mask, or, I don't know.
Yeah,
Has
and
anybody
I,
heard anything about
Yeah.
it? Because we've got a whole vaccination process going on, but if these people are doing what they think is right, getting full vaccine, and they're safe, then can we start letting them participate, come to some of the sporting events? We have retired people in this town. They don't have anybody here. For them, it's an entertaining thing, watching the kids, trying their best to be good athletes and grow. Programs that you have, Matt, I know it's a loaded question, I'm not expecting an answer, but is there data available, or is there planning going on? Because you could end up with a lot of the population with a vaccine, and they're all saying, well, if I can't do anything, why did I go ahead and get this done anyway?
yeah, and I think those are good questions, and I don't know that anybody has the answer to them. I do know that in a similar conversation, similar but not identical, the conversations that I've been in regarding school personnel and where they fall on the list of priorities as far as vaccination, those questions about if a school personnel is vaccinated, what does that mean for wearing a mask in school or wearing a shield and those type of things? While nobody's giving definitive answers, I don't believe that school personnel that are vaccinated are then going to be able to not wear a mask inside in schools. So I don't think we know that answer. But yeah, I think those are the next questions that are gonna be coming is, you know, once this vaccination really picks up steam and gets rolling, then now what? And how does that impact people?
Well, there's millions of vaccines coming, and there's a pressure for them to use those whole vials, which means lots of people are gonna get it. I already see now where they're vaccinating some of these people, and people are just sitting there. So if somebody doesn't show up, they have to use the vial and they're able to get a shot. Well, pretty quick, that population is gonna come in, and I just think that,
Yeah.
I don't know, I haven't been able to read anything about it, you can't get any data on it. But I think we need to be aware that we may have to start looking at that, because how do we get back to where we were? If we have to wait till the last person in the nation vaccinated, what's never coming back?
Right. Yeah, those are big questions. So,
Well, just maybe food for thought.
Yep.
But it kind of combines a bunch of this together.
Anything else for Matt?
thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Donnie, Buildings and Grounds?
Good evening, everyone. Well, it's been a good week so far. We finally hired a custodian, after 6 months. Mike Lose comes out of New London schools. He's had 6 years' experience up there. He actually lives north of town here. I think he'll be a good addition. A little bit on the building, they actually poured the wrestling room today, cement's laid in there. They had 2 semis come in with ductwork for the gyms. They're huge. Pretty much took the parking lot up this morning and made a mess back there, but we had a contractor from the Ryan Company come out and work on our boilers to get them up and running with oil now, being maybe get some cold weather. We had some training on the boilers. There's a lot of automation. They're really nice boilers. After we figured out what they can all do, yeah, they'll pretty well tell you what's going on, what the problem is. It's been great that way. Been working with Greg Capser out in the shop once in a while. We got his iron worker up and running. Now he'll be able to punch holes and shear metal. It was kind of interesting to put the dies and stuff in and get it all working. He has never done that. Got that going. The other thing, we did finally receive the door for the outside of the welding shop, or actually the frame. The frame came in once all bent and out of shape. They waited long enough for it, and then it came in bent, and now it came in this week, and they installed it yesterday. So we actually got the doors all out in the shops now. Other than that, any questions for me?
I have a question. So on the boilers, and we've gone through this process now, we had rooms in the school, different, both of them, where some of these rooms were 90 degrees in there.
Mhm.
We had other rooms that were cool, and we were all over the spectrum. Part of the idea to getting some of that in place was to handle some of those things. What does it seem like? I know the kids aren't there, but if you have a hot room, it's probably gonna be hot even if kids aren't there.
True.
So what are you seeing? Is,
See, this,
have this, is
we're
this
not
help
quite,
us?
our Yule's not quite done with all the automation yet.
No.
But I will be able to see then different areas, which they haven't finished yet, but that's coming down the line yet. I mean,
Will it be done this winter so we can at least see what it does?
But-
Or is it slower?
My question would be, are the air handling units and other things, especially when we're talking about elementary school, will make a bigger difference towards that than the boilers themselves? The boilers are still just gonna produce the heat.
right,
Yeah, so, and I was just gonna interject, I mean, I think those hot and cool spots will probably still be here. We still have a large portion of this building that's on pneumatics. Pneumatics, while they can last a long time, they also can fail, regularly, and unless it's reported and stuff, that you don't always know that they fail, they don't communicate to anything that they're in failure mode, so. Granted, we are gaining more electronic digital control with what Yule's gonna be putting in, for the control system, so Donnie will be able to see how the backbone of the system is operating, how that's actually feeding heat to individual spaces. That is still, very much on older technology. I don't necessarily know that that's going to significantly change one way or the other, with the boilers, by just replacing new boilers.
I was curious, because when that took place, I was reading about some stuff on boilers and the new boilers compared to older boilers. And the older boilers were many times so inefficient that when it quit calling for heat, it was pumping out heat for the next hour and a half.
well, they were.
The new boilers are
size.
supposed to kind of slim that down. And therefore, what they talked about is the older technology with the zone valves. Many times, even though when you looked at it, it looked like it worked properly, with a massive amount of heat coming through those, they sometimes didn't work. Which the new boilers appear that they may take care of that.
In some instances, yeah, on the bigger air handlers and stuff, on the smaller ones, you'll still feel the heat come a lot longer.
Other questions for Donnie? Thanks, Donnie.
Learning model, COVID-19 update, Matt?
Yeah, so just, obviously a standing agenda item here and, the last two meetings just before our holiday break and then our first meeting after the break are in the agenda there. You can see kind of where the cases county, wide, Candy, Ojai, Meeker and Stearns are all, represented in those charts. We are seeing the trend moving in a good direction. I will admit, I log into the Stearns County COVID dashboard every day at about noon and see what the numbers are coming in at and again, they continue to hold down. The last 2 days have been really good. I think we had 21 yesterday reported and 32 reported today, so we're getting back to those numbers that I think are more manageable and stuff. So let's hope that trend can continue. Both Mary and David spoke about the process as far as bringing students back. And so that is in place and is gonna continue as we move forward here. We are still talking about what that's gonna look like for senior high students, and particularly, I think our juniors and seniors will probably look differently than other students. But do know that those plans are coming as well, but we will keep rolling students back with the goal to get everybody back to 4 days a week. And then from there, that's when, as a district, we would need to make the leap to a new learning model. So as long as we're still going 4 days a week in the building and 1 day a week remote, we're still considered in hybrid learning. So right now, we can move within that hybrid learning as much as we want. We don't need public health or MDE or anybody to be part of those decisions. Those can be local decisions. Once we make the move from either going from hybrid to full in-person learning, and that would be 5 days for all students or for certain grade bands, that we do need public health and the Department of Ed and our local regional support team, which comes out of Resource Training and Solution. We need all three of those entities then to get in the loop and approve our plan. I think that's a logical next step. I do see that that's where we are gonna end up this spring, particularly if we can keep this trend moving. It just would be more reassuring if the current case level is what we are going to be experiencing. I think that's going to certainly bring that conversation quicker than later. So know that that's still out there and is certainly the direction that we're going.
I have a question about, the goal going to, 5 days a week. Would there still be options for students to choose or families to choose to do remote?
So right now, families always have the option to select remote. And it doesn't matter what your learning model is, if you're in a hybrid model or an in-person, you can always opt for remote. Districts can put some timelines on as far as if they want to select or if they've chosen remote as to when they would be able to reevaluate that choice. We've tried to kind of pair that with the end of quarters, but with as much reason and flexibility as we can provide. But yeah, they would always have the ability to choose full remote. And I think, David alluded to this a little bit when he was talking about the secondary. I think the reality is, we need to take what is working and what has been beneficial through this forced experiment, and we need to have that become part of our system. And so I think that's gonna be the piece as we move forward is, how do we take those good qualities that we were forced to learn about and make sure that we include those and keep those as part of how we do business and how we operate, because there certainly are things that I feel like are very valuable in students that we would maybe not have suspected or have surprised us, but some students have absolutely thrived, and we've seen different students just because of that and stuff. So I think it's important for us to hold on to some of that.
I think society-wide, that statement is true. I think private businesses, public businesses, everybody alike can look at, try to find the positives of what's happened through COVID and search out what did we do differently that worked really well and how can we do that. I think the district as a whole has done a good job and look forward to seeing what we can continue to do in the future.
Any questions at all with the learning model? It kind of laid out what this will look like, at least through the end of January, kind of getting us to that first week, that February 8th week. That's kind of what we know for now. Obviously, everything will continue to have a little fluidity to it, and so we'll keep updating people. That COVID team is gonna continue to meet every week, and as we are able, the goal is to be able to provide as much in-person learning and in-person opportunities as we possibly can. That continues to be the goal. Okay?
All right, student achievement, Mr. Orline, Ms. Holmberg?
All right. How do you guys want to do this? Do you want to both come up?
Only we're 6 feet apart.
Well, someone can sit here and,
I'm just kidding.
Between
Yeah.
middle school or
Okay.
elementary and high school.
Separated?
okay,
We're good.
I will get this presentation up then. So just a little bit of background on this, obviously, since we have started this new learning models and everything, the question that members of this board have been asking are we gonna see what the academic impacts and student achievement impacts? And so that's what David and Mary are here tonight to talk about. The only thing that I do just wanna preface for the board is this is a limited data set that we are working with. So we are comparing the 1920 school year, the first quarter of 1920 to the first quarter of 2021. And so it is a small data set. We're not talking about a large data set that when we start talking about doing some comparisons. But both of them have put some stuff together and they'll kind of walk you through it. And certainly if you have questions.
Please interrupt along the way or please ask along the way. I'll start with the elementary building. The first few slides talk to us about grades. The grades were taken from Infinite Campus, our student information system for 2019, 2020, and then 2020, 21, using first quarter. The percentage was too low to do comparisons. I know that you had asked for failing, number of kids who were failing. The percentages were far too low to get adequate data to compare. If we went with a failing 50%, 60%, it had to go to 70% to get data to compare. So I know 70% isn't failing, but it does show the percent of our kiddos who may or may not have been struggling. Just so you're aware, our staff know our kiddos. When I shared this data with our leadership teams, they could name the kids. They could name the exact number of kids and which kiddos those were and what may have contributed to that or what things that they had in place last year to help our kids improve. So here you see our number of kindergartens that scored less than 70%. Throughout the elementary slides, last year was blue and this year is green. Areas to note here of significance were the discrepancies between our foundational reading skills and some of our foundational math skills from last year to compare to this year. If we keep going, I'm gonna tie in these grades with our fast bridge because it's nice to have two data points with the same groups of kids. So then if we move to first grade, you see the number of our first grade kiddos moving or scoring less than 70%. So our first grade grades reading based on reading levels A to Z. By the end of first quarter, our first grade kiddos are expected to be at a level D. So A is the pre-primary and it moves all the way through A, B, C, D. By the end of first quarter, we'd like them to be at level D. So you can see that in 1920, in literacy A by the end of first quarter, so pre-primary, we didn't have any kids. In level B, we didn't have any, and this year we had 8. Level C, we had 6 last year and 20 this year. That's a significant data point to note the change there. By the end of second quarter, we'd like our kiddos to be at level F. So it'll be really interesting over the next 2 weeks to see where our kids fell. What kind of growth did they have from being in person for those first few weeks of school and then being with us 2 days a week as compared to last spring when they weren't with us at all. Our second grade friends that scored less than 70%, I think the data speaks for itself. This year, our word attack skills showed significantly fewer people. If you count 5 kids as significantly fewer, we have to look at the number of kids that the data represents. And then as we move through third grade, results are very similar from about one child for each of the different grades. You're probably not seeing social studies and some of those other areas. That's because the numbers are 0. If they're not listed at all, our kids were 0. 4th grade, same number of kids both years. And then 5th grade was similar, except for 5th grade math has improved this year and geography has made a significant change. So then if we move on to fast bridge testing, you'll see the slides that talk about e-reading, A-reading, Cbmr, and A-math. E-reading is our early reading. E-reading is a reading assessment that's done only to our kindergarten and 1st grade students. E-reading assesses those early reading skills, early literacy, phonemic awareness, phonetics, things like letter sounds, blending, word segmentation. Those are our early reading skills. When we move to A-reading, okay, so I'll go through this first. E-reading is just our K1 friends. And again, notice that the data correlates strongly that our kids were at a higher risk this year compared to last year. And that makes sense when we compare that with those grades data. It shows us that we have 2 points that say, hey, our kids are struggling with those early reading skills. So then if we go to A-reading on this slide represents our 2nd through 5th grade friends. A-reading also occurs at the middle school level. So A-reading is the broad reading skills. That's the concepts of print, phonics, comprehension, and vocabulary that we think of when our kids are now reading to learn. So they make the transition from learning to read to reading to learn. So you can see here that in our 2nd through 5th grade friends, the growth, the comparison is pretty similar. There's not a lot that stands out here percentage-wise. I love to see that moving forward, that if you look at just the 2020, 2021 data, so just those green lines, and we go from high-risk fall to high-risk winter, those numbers are dropping. It should. We want our kids to constantly be moving toward the right-hand side of the grid. And that would tell us then that some risk fall and some risk winter, though that one went up, it was probably some of our friends that really struggled that made a growth, that made those gains. Then if we move on to the next slide, we see Cbmr. Cbmr, the easiest way that I remember that one is I had to say it slowly, Cbmr. So Cbmr is our fluency check. It's accuracy and it's automaticity. So that's basically fluency. Cbmr assessments are given in grades 1 through 5 and at the high school as well. And there you can see that our trend data looks very similar, so that's promising. Okay, our kiddos are able to read fluently. And then if we go on to the final slide about elementary, we've got A-math. A-math is broad math. So A-math assesses what we would consider the benchmarks in our MCA test. So it's areas like number sense, it's operations, it's cardinality, algebraic thinking, measurement and data, and geometry. And this one's measured all the way up through the 8th grade. So our broad math skills. Again, if you're comparing 19 to 2021, you can see that there's a little bit of discrepancies in some of the areas, but overall, we're showing the kids are slowly sliding over, and that's a good thing as well. Areas to note, like I talked about a little bit ago, our kindergarten foundational skills, there's a correlation between the 2 different kinds of data we connected, and not that I'm necessarily as concerned with what happened with 2019-20 as did this fall, but where are we at right now? That's some pretty impressive data that shows that we're working hard to identify individual needs. We've used the winter data that we collected right before Christmas to now do our power half hour and intervention groups. And so we're working on finding out exactly where those kiddos are. Do they need one-on-one instruction? Are there 2 kiddos that can work together and do 1-on-2? Do we need small groups of us? Do we need to have tier 1, that whole group instruction?
I have a quick question.
Yes,
The
thank you.
intervention methods that we're doing now, I can't remember, were we already doing those last year, or was that new? I can't remember what that presentation was.
We began this last year.
So it was this last year, okay.
And that also, I think, plays into the data. We've only got our first
Right.
year and then this year in a pandemic data to compare. It would be nice if we had 5 or 6 years of data prior to get a true picture.
Yeah, I mean, because it's just, like the first thing, like when I looked at these slides and what I noticed is, especially those first ones, even though it's in numbers, if there was like 5 students that looked
Yes,
high compared to
yes.
1, but percentage wise, like we're pretty similar. So it's
Yes.
like during this pandemic, during remote learning, there's not like huge disparity. So what is it? Is it because we're getting better intervention? Is it like, I don't know, it's just like kind of mind-boggling. I assumed things would be obviously worse. I mean, that's what the narrative is being said. But in reality, things are going pretty well considering, so it's like, why, how is it still going that well? I guess, you know what I mean, like, so what are we doing in the classroom or doing at home that really
Right,
even do even better when we are full? I mean, I'm just surprised, I guess.
right, as was I, and I noted that, that the discrepancy doesn't match what we've heard, or what
Right.
we've come to
No.
expect, which is fantastic.
Right.
Is it because we're doing those interventions, we're getting
Right.
better at targeting the interventions? Is it because our kiddos were here 2 days a week, so we were really able to get those small groups going? Is it because we brought in our children that needed the most support 4 days? Is it because this year we implemented 7 mindsets and that real push for SEL and that strong emotional, social emotional base? There are so many factors, I think, that come into play. Yeah.
Especially like
I'm
if we're doing
impressed.
more personalized learning and that's what we've been trying to do, are we actually able to do that better this year in this environment? And imagine we're back in school and continue, I don't know. It just gives me a lot of hope.
I question that, what we hear, those trends in different districts throughout. I mean, we're a very fortunate small district that has a lot of great staff and brought in and implemented a lot of great things within the district that maybe other districts that are much larger don't have the capacity to bring that in. You're gonna lose students a little bit easier in those situations, whereas I feel we have a, I guess I would pat all of you guys on the back for that level of keeping our students focused.
I think one other thing that is important to remember is, I think there's also a component of, and maybe a testament to having literacy-rich households where kids are going when they're not in school. Because it's, I mean, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, they're sponges. They're innately wired to learn. And so learning doesn't just need to happen in the 4 walls of a school building or in a classroom. Learning can happen with mom and dad at home, or, spending 5 to 10 minutes a night reading to your child before they go to bed. The amount of literacy skills that kids can pick up just from that experience alone, I think people really underestimate that. So I think that's the other component here is, yes, this is what we can do, and we know we have a lot of influence over these 7.5 hours when kids are in school. But let's also be real, there's 16.5 hours where they're not in school and they're in the community and they're at home and they're going to this organization or that organization. And so it's all of those, it's the cumulative of all of those things that I think also really drive where our kids end up.
Because I bet most parents, I mean, I'm generalizing, probably didn't know the day in and day out of their kids' classroom experience. Now that they do know, they can ask better questions because they know what's happening in science, and so I would assume they're more involved. I mean, I would hope they are, so like you said, that might be a big factor. So then, again, how do we continue that transparency? So parents are, I mean, I hope it doesn't go back to, oh, now you're the school's problem. Like,
Right.
how do we keep the parents engaged?
Engaged, yes.
Like with being part of the process, if that is a factor, which probably is a big factor.
Right.
I don't know, I'm just interested, this is great, I love charts.
What were the dates of the data sets?
Excuse me, I'm
What were
sorry.
the dates of the data sets?
So-
First quarter of 2020 and or this third quarter of 2020, first quarter of 2020,
First quarter of 2019, so last fall, and first quarter of this fall.
okay?
At the end, it's just report cards, taken straight data.
So the comparison really is going from standard school to non-standard.
Right. With different sets of kids, that's the other thing
Yeah.
that we have to consider, that they can grade.
But I think it'll be interesting now because you're just collecting or finishing the collection of winter data.
Yeah.
So it will be another interesting snapshot to look at once we have the second quarter to be able to now see how that moves
Where do
as
we
well.
follow the grades, so like how did last year's second graders,
Let's see,
like are
not
they
the-
showing growth and progress, like?
Not to put, I want to need you to put numbers to that, but do you see, or do the teachers recognize those that struggled, kindergartners, is that still some of that growth process?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's to look at our learners that are struggling the most and say, what's going on? What are the factors? What
It
can we
was
learn from
biggest struggle
kindergarten?
last year.
Yes, we have grade level meetings once a month, and so the school psych, the social worker and myself attend all of those. And so we're able to bring back data, so if Jacob would say, hey, I'm really worried about Susie, as a first grader, do we know what happened last year? Then the three of us can look back and say, oh, yep, Susie was identified last year too. Not till the end of the year, was there a lifestyle change? Was there a significant event in her life? Or what things were we doing in kindergarten that were working that we can continue in first grade or that didn't work, so we need to try something new? So there is that fluidity and that continuity, great question. Another benefit of a small school.
Any other questions? I think that's the last one for Ellen.
Yep.
Any other questions for Mary?
If more come up, please email me. I like Maggie, love the data.
Thank you for doing that. It's just, it's so helpful to see it
Mhm.
in that way.
Of course.
Okay, so, a lot of this data is probably gonna look different than the elementary because of the number of, well, we didn't have MCAs this last spring. And so, also, when we're talking about data and trends and things like that, I think one thing to consider when we look at this and see that our kids are really doing great is it was mid-March when we went into remote learning. And so there was a decent chunk of our curriculum and our, the skills that we're working with students that were already there. And so by mid-March, we're typically looking at getting ready for MCA testing in April. And so we weren't that far off to begin with. But what I would also say is what I've learned with this, and me being kind of new to the high school, on looking at grades and things like that, is what I've noticed is there are less students that are falling through the cracks. Our teachers have really, for many different reasons, have really gotten good at reaching out to students, reaching out to families that maybe in a traditional classroom didn't always happen because that student was, it wasn't an issue. It was, they're in the room. But I think when we went to remote last spring, that it really just became a necessity that we contacted all of those students that were struggling as much as we can. And I think from my perspective, I am more entrenched in how students are doing than I've ever thought I would be. I find myself really, contacting families and working with students on an individual basis where if we didn't have this, I don't know how much that would happen. And so those are some of the really great things that have come out of this, is just really able to create personal relationships with our students. And so when we came back this fall, we were fortunate enough to have our students in the building. But when we did have to go to a more restrictive hybrid, that base was already there, and our students and teachers have just really done a great job of kind of melding that together. And so when we look at our data, you'll see that, and you'll see it in the number when we start talking about the DNF mid-quarter list and what that looks like and what it looks like now. And I can give you a few examples on that. So what we did is we took our middle school students, grades 6 through 8, and so we've done our fall benchmarking with FastBridge, and we've also done our winter benchmarking. And so with 2 sets of data for that, with our middle school students, something different that we did this year is they did their benchmarking during open house. So they came in and were able to do that. We were able to get a lot of our students done at that point so that we could kind of hit the ground running when school started, and we had a few that we needed to get caught up. But that's where we did it in the fall. And then the winter, we finished it up in December, and so that's where we're at. So when we're talking about middle school, grades 6 through 8, the A math, again, is the broad math. And so we have about 207 students that are in grades 6 through 8. So when we're talking about the percentages, 2 students make up about 1%. And so when you're 1 or 2 percentages different, you can see that when you put it in perspective with the number of students that we have that are taking the assessment. So, but again, the first page is the percentage of math students, and we want to see that trend where we have more students in the low risk to the exceeds, and I think we've done that. And obviously when one area is lower, those students are going into a different area. But I think for me, when I look at the high risk in the fall and the winter, and I see that we're about the same, I think that helps us to understand that there's always going to be that percentage of students that we want to work on with our interventions, with our MTSS. And Maggie, you had asked about the interventions and the things that are going on at the elementary. Also, those are new at the high school too. So we're really in just our second year of MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support for our middle school students. And so we're identifying students who are at risk, and Maria Rasmussen and Chad Campbell and Todd Spanier are just doing a wonderful job of pushing into classrooms, meeting with students individually, and also we've created study skills class for some of our middle school students who need that. And we create those classes kind of as the year goes on. And so it's based on need, and we're able to hit our students that way.
This being grades 6 through 8, do you think you find, just off the top of your head, one of the grade levels being, changing that number, making that swing better than another grade level, or is it pretty equal across all 3?
I think it's pretty equal across all 3. And so if there was a big discrepancy, then we would have singled that out.
Okay.
But this is kind of in general. And the thing is these are a lot of the, these are some of the same students. So it's not all, apples to oranges. So that was a reason for part of that.
Okay.
And then if you want, the number slide, there's some discrepancies in the number that we're working on. So if we could just we'll concentrate on the percentages.
Okay.
And again, this is the A reading, and where you're looking at just a few broad skills. And so this is really kind of the same thing. We see that trend where there are some areas that are really close. And if we look at our low risk and exceeds in the fall and the winter, see how those are building up. And so just really impressed with where we're at. Nothing really big stands out.
Maybe now, sorry.
Go ahead.
Maybe now would be a good time to kind of explain what those categories mean. So exceeds is above the 70th percentile. And low risk is considered 40 to 69%. And so those would be our kids that we are pretty confident that our low risk kids are going to meet the standards. If there's some risk, it's that 16 to 39 percentile. And so there's some chance that they might or might not meet those standards. And then our high risk are those bottom 15% that are the kids that struggle the most, in that 0 to 15 percentile that we say these kids need some serious intervention. So that's how we look at it moving forward, is what are the chances that these kids will meet the standards by the time they graduate. And FastBridge is actually highly correlated to Minnesota academic standards and MCA data. So, sorry, I just need to clarify.
Yeah, and this data probably wasn't available a couple years ago at the middle school level. So the strides that we've made, I think, are just unbelievable. And, credit Mr. Bullard for giving us the opportunity to explore those different areas, but the middle school teachers have really stepped up and you know, we have some good conversations during our grade level meetings and we're really hitting those students and so it's been a really good process for us. So this is the PSAT and this is taken in the fall for our 11th graders. And this is just again a snapshot of what those results look like. We had 23 juniors take this assessment and it's voluntary. And so basically one student equals about 4.3%. And if you can see that at the mean score, we are a little bit lower than what the state is at. And then if you look at the number of participants in the state and then the number of nationwide, we kind of fall in between the state and the national areas. And so final grade report for each semester. And so we took the fall semester of last year and the fall quarter of first quarter of this year. And so that is, you'll notice that there were less Ds that were given out. And then if you go to the next slide there. So that was grade 10 and 11. And then this is also grade 10 and 11. The number of Fs that were given out. I think when I talked about that, teachers and myself are just feel like we're more in tune with how our individual students are doing. And so there were a number of cases where, you know, we're getting to the end of, even right now, we're getting to the end of second quarter and we are reaching out to students all the time to have them come in, to, you know, talk about what assignments need to be done. And it just, I feel like that has just really stepped up our game into getting those students to a point where they're doing the best they can and they're passing those classes. I think when a student gets a D or an F, it isn't always a true measure of what they know. And so if we can be more aware of how that student is, what they're learning and how they're mastering any of the standards, and we concentrate more on that, that will help us to continue to have that trend down. But we're not looking to make things easier, but we want to clarify what that grade is. And is that grade a true measure of what that student knows at that particular time? And I think we've done a really good job of working with our students that maybe would have gotten a poor grade because they didn't turn in a bunch of assignments. But if that teacher is communicating with the student and the family, and you know, we're more understanding of what circumstances are, and so that is probably the main reason why we're seeing that trend down a little bit with those Ds and the Fs.
And I hope that philosophical shift continues, not that we go back to the classroom and teachers are like, you didn't turn this in, done, like that. It's more about comprehension and holistic,
Yep.
you know, learning. And so I hope, you know, we can continue to create that environment versus just like that grade's a measurement of everything, because I mean, we all know that's not. So I think that's encouraging to see that shift.
Yeah. The reality is teachers are at different levels when it comes to where they are philosophically on things like that. But I really think we're moving towards the middle a little bit more and understanding more about what are the circumstances behind that grade, and is my grading based on academics or is it based on other things that are not measuring what that student knows. And just a GPA comparison, students in first semester last year as 9th graders and first quarter as 10th graders. So that is the same group of students for the most part. And same thing here for grades 10 and 11. And then 11 to 12. Any questions on anything so far? Okay. So I just wanted to kind of give a breakdown on, because we did go from 8 classes to 4 classes and kind of how that looks. And so, last year we had about 3,870 instructional minutes per class, 5 days a week, and that's every other day. And then first quarter, we had about almost 3,000 instructional minutes per class. That does not include any of the Fridays. And they're really, it took us a while to get going, but Fridays have really become an important instructional tool for our teachers and our students. So I don't want to minimize the fact that they're not all in the classroom on Friday, but there's a lot of things going on with our students.
You go back, so
Yeah,
when you look at that, like, that's astonishing to look at the number of instructional minutes of difference, yet the outcomes are not that significantly different. So what do we learn from that? Like, what was happening then during that extra 1,000 minutes of instruction time that weren't increasing our outcome? You know what I mean? So it's like, again, this just gives me a lot of hope. Again, what can we do differently? How do we change that time space if that many minutes really didn't make an impact, I guess? I don't know, maybe I'm reading that.
No, and
What's the comparison to November 6th compared to January 23rd? So one of them September 3rd
Oh,
to
that's
January
true.
23rd. The next one, September 8th, is November 6th.
Right, but it's because of the way they're structured. So September through January was every other day. September through November was every day. So it's a lot of it has,
it's equal in comparison, but not in time span, pretty much. And then you'll notice that we did start school a week later this year, which probably would have been 3 or 4
But it's
more classes.
equal per se in like subject matter covered,
Right.
right? So that content is covered.
10 less days of 900 less hours.
So
But it's covered every day instead of every other day. You know,
Yep.
is that a method of, if I do something every day, I remember it more than if I did it every other day?
if you add if you take the weeks between September 8th and November 6th, I believe it's either 9 or 10 weeks. So if you add 9 or 10 Fridays to that, you're gonna come up with just about the exact same number of instructional days. That's really the difference that's here, is it's those Fridays is what it is. Otherwise, you're pretty much talking about the exact same, time commitment.
And as a kind of a caveat to this, you know, Mr. Bullard and I both come from schools with 4-day weeks. And so this isn't really anything new to us as far as looking at data and how functional that 5th day is. And so, but it has been evolving, and that's, I think, what's important to know is that we're just, those Fridays are there for our students and our students that are struggling. And that's a day where we can focus on those students a little bit more. And the students that are doing great and thriving in that class, Fridays aren't necessarily the time for them to be engaging with that teacher. So I think that's been a big thing for us. But are the teachers, are they covering the same amount of information that they did in a full semester? Our teachers will tell you yes. But the focus is different when they have it every day. There are times, you know, this was a time for us to really look at what we're teaching and take out some of the things that maybe are the non-academic areas and standards that maybe are overlapping a little bit in another subject area, and streamlining it. And you'll see even some colleges are offering these classes where they're covering so many things in a shorter period of time. And colleges have offered that for years with summer school. You can take a 3-credit summer school class in, 4 weeks, and it's the same class as what was happening during a semester. So I think that how you're using that instructional time really makes a difference and it tells you whether there's some fluff in there or not.
And I think the other thing that this just really points out is one of our biggest fixed assets is time. And how many times do we use time as a reason why we can't do something, or we can't explore this, or we can't do this? I think this opens up the possibility to really challenge that conversation, that time is what is prohibiting whatever it is we want to do. So I think we have to keep that in mind as we move forward.
And again, with our older students, it was difficult to come up with, any assessments and any data to show any trends. So I did just do a snapshot of 2 classes, young adult lit and statistics, and just went through and averaged out the GPAs and what the average grade was in those classes, and comes out to about the same. And it's a 100% total different group of students this time, so. Any questions from me or?
Any other questions or discussion?
I
Try to say anything.
think it's just, thank you for providing the data, and it just reinforces the direction we're going. Like, I feel so incredibly hopeful, because it's like, yeah, what can those extra minutes and hours of internships and whatever it may be, we can fit those in, like our students can accomplish what they need to. They don't have to be here, 8 to 3 exactly for this many hour classes. Like, it's pushing people to open their minds that we can do things differently. And then, I mean, if people can't see that through this, I don't know what to say.
Again, thank you guys. The strategic planning act.
All right. So I did put the document in, Drive. I will bring it up here as well. Okay, so a couple things. First of all, this is heavy on the draft, so let's not get too nervous just yet. So as far as where we're at with this, obviously, this is the first time the board is seeing this at all. We're gonna have a discussion about it tonight. I would like to just hear some thoughts and feedback on it. Tomorrow, we have our admin meeting, and the admin group will probably be spending a good bulk of that meeting dealing with this document and refining and fine tuning. From there, we have to get this document out to all employees and get some feedback there. And then at the same time, I would like this document to go out to all the community members that participated in one of the community sessions. I would like them to get the draft as well, to be able to provide some feedback on that as well. So with that, I think I'll just kind of walk through this, and then again at the end, if there is feedback or impressions, I will just take those notes down, and this is going to be coming back to the board at the next meeting at the end of the month. Realistically, I think the final approval is looking like February versus January is probably where we're going to wind up. So just so people have kind of a visual of what does a strategic plan mean, and to me, it's really, if you flip the words around, it's really more impactful. It is planning strategically. So planning with purpose is really what the goal is. And you can kind of think about it from a pyramid perspective. Everything starts with that vision and direction of where is the school district going? And from there, what is the ultimate purpose of that district? And then you get down to really the meat and potatoes of a plan, and that's really the goals and objectives. And then within those goals and objectives, there are actual strategies that you feel like is a place to start. And then within, for each strategy, there's a tactic, and that's an actual action step, things that you can actually deliver and see actionable items. And that's really what this body is going to hold people accountable for, are those tactics and those action steps. Now, all of this is going to be great. It's all going to make a lot of sense when it's on paper. But the best thing that everybody has to understand with the strategic plan is it also has to be fluid. Because this is where our best guess is today, doesn't mean that we aren't gonna learn new information next month or next year and realize that, hey, we have to be able to pivot. And so this, you will see this plan is going to be written in such a way that it is a broad overreaching plan. You are not going to get very narrow, very drilled down goals because of that very thing. We want general focus, but we also want the ability, as we learn and discover new and better ways, to be able to include those and include those as part of our plan, okay? So looking at this, when you talk about kind of vision, where is the district going? I think you can kind of sum this up. I took this from a combination of information I learned from students. We visited with students in grade 4th through 11th grade to get their input as far as thoughts, perspective about the district and what we should focus on from community members, and then also from staff members. And so a draft vision is Paynesville Area Schools is preparing students to succeed in an ever-changing world by nurturing and develop their natural curiosity, creating critical thinkers and problem solvers who possess dynamic academic skills that maximize their potential and build the foundation of responsible, ethical, compassionate members of our community. I think that kind of naturally summarizes probably what the vision of every school district in the state, country, whatever, that's trying to do the best thing for kids, probably should be able to buy into that one. When you talk about mission, the district had a mission statement. It's on the website, it's on our letterhead. Our mission is to pair students with the academic, social, and personal skills to be career, college, and community ready. And then when you take and look at all the feedback that we got when we did the staff session or community session or student session, you could really come up with how this purpose has some characteristics to it. And those characteristics are talking about engaged students, confident and competent learners, well-rounded opportunities, safe learning environments, supportive school structure, strong work ethic, and real-world skills. Those are all taken from this Wordle. This Wordle was created by all the people that participated in some form of a strategic planning. So the homework assignment or the fifth question was, what is your definition of success for a student at Paynesville area schools? And then after writing your definition, you also had to circle the most important word. We put all that into a Wordle website, and this is the Wordle that comes up. So the words that came up the most were successful, confident, engaged, healthy, integrity, supportive, safe, prepared, skills. That's what our snapshot of what people feel is student success at Paynesville area schools. So how do we take that then and incorporate that into potentially some strategic goals? Questions so far? Okay, so strategic goals, I have 4 of them up here. I think 3 of them are goal worthy. I want to talk about the 4th one, and we'll have some discussion about that. So the first goal is about growth. And the growth, so Paynesville area schools prioritizes growth as an organization. We strive to maximize student and staff growth on a daily basis. Growth will be measured through a holistic approach that includes but is not limited to the following elements. Couple things that are important about what I believe we need to have for a strategic goal about growth is growth isn't good enough to just have student growth. Yes, we're a school. If we're not talking about growing students academically, emotionally, and socially, we're in the wrong business and we should go do something else. But our most precious resource is our people. We are in a people business. We're in a people industry. So to me, this growth has to be geared towards staff as much as it needs to be geared towards students. So staff and growth is intentional and it's purposeful. And it needs to also be able to be part of the conversation of resource allocation and all of those things that come with the strategic goal. So when we start talking about a holistic approach, if you look at, or if you go to school websites and start looking at their strategic plan, most of the time, what you're going to find is B. You're going to find their growth goal is going to be around intellectual wellness. You're going to see a goal about literacy development, or maybe about how they're going to improve their MCAs, or maybe about how they're going to raise their average ACT score. Those are gonna be pretty standard measurements that we're gonna talk about when you look at growth goals associated with strategic plans. This plan acknowledges that we are a school, and yes, that needs to be a core component of what we're doing, but to me, it's only one of 3 growth pillars. So it's really gonna be a wellness approach, and that wellness approach would start with emotional and physical wellness. We would talk about resiliency. Mary mentioned briefly the social emotional learning piece that we're implementing. That is core and critical to what goes on. I mean, if you don't have students walking through your doors that are socially and emotionally in a safe place, in a nurturing environment, please explain to me how you're gonna sit down and teach them to read or to compute mathematics or any foundational literacy skill. It just simply is not going to happen. So for us, growth needs to be larger than the intellectual wellness. Obviously, intellectual wellness, we'll talk about some of those traditional pieces. Personally, I think we can come up with literacy development and we can measure that without ever having to use a Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment as a data point. Can we use it and could it be a data point? Sure, it could. But as far as I'm concerned, when you're talking about the data you saw tonight about FastBridge and STAR diagnostic assessment, those assessments, that is the real-time academic data that I feel we should be using to really determine if our kids are making progress or not. It's fine to give a student an assessment in April as a snapshot to see how they did on that day in April. But I'll be perfectly frank with you, on best case scenario, we give that in April, we maybe can see a possibility of where kids, how they performed in May. Realistically, it's not gonna be finalized until June or July. Instructionally, that's not benefiting us as a school district really at all. So when we're talking about literacy development, we're talking about the data that you guys saw tonight. That is gonna be really the core component to this. Curiosity, creativity, critical thinking, engagement, and equity, all of those things, those are an interesting component to this because I think we have a huge opportunity here. We certainly can build in things from like the Minnesota Student Survey. They will allude to some of these things. We get good Paynesville specific data for those type of characteristics and qualities. But I also think it would be really good for us to actually go through a process and develop internal evaluation tools where we can actually develop a tool that we want to be able to measure student engagement. It might be an assessment or a tool that is used with students. Maybe it's used with parents. Maybe it's used with educators. Maybe it's used across multiple stakeholder groups. So I think that's a core component to this as well. And then social wellness, again, that goes back to that relationship piece, mentor, advisor relationships. A lot of what you heard Mr. Orline talking about when you're talking about that reduced number of students on that D's and F's list. I mean, let's be real honest, and that's about relationships, is what that is. It's strong relationships, strong student-teacher relationships, and that a lot of times will drive student achievement. So to me, this is a comprehensive, holistic growth goal. That it would be a wellness approach. Yes, intellectual wellness is going to be core to this. We're a school, it has to be. But we also need to get serious about the emotional, physical wellness side of things, and we also need to get serious about that social wellness. Questions at all about growth and maybe approaching it with a holistic approach versus a traditional academic MDE, Minnesota report card type thing. What are board thoughts on that?
I personally feel this has kind of been a conversation we've been having for a while now, and I do definitely like the direction that we're headed.
And I think too, if we say we care about the holistic development of our students, we have to be more well-rounded in what we're assessing. It can't just be intellectual. And the thought, you know, and I've shared this before, is like to think about, instead of having students thinking about just collecting their grades, you know, that you're connecting those things. And I see this as a way that even like through our, you know, our classes that are offered, like, for example, whether it's, let's just say physics or whatever, what part, like, can we talk about stress management? Like that our teachers are actually integrating this and saying, okay, it's finals time. This is one of our goals. We're gonna talk, like, to actually then talk and teach about those things. Because I think part of it is our students are gonna have to know that these goals exist in order to really like receive it versus it just being like, they were assessed on something, they didn't even know what it was for. So like, how do you truly integrate it then into that classroom experience, that these are, like this part of this class, we're gonna be talking about engagement, like that is explaining what that means. So it's exciting to see it laid out because it's gonna kind of force.
Yeah, and you take this as a growth model. And I admit that we would have assessments that we have tools we have to build. I have a partner who wants to work on this with us, so I'm excited by that. I think they will bring a lot to the table. But I also look at this growth model as, this to me is potentially the roadmap and framework for 4-year plans for students at Paynesville Area High School. At the end of 8th grade, when a kid is entering 9th grade, they could actually develop their own high school blueprint based off our strategic plan growth goal.
And
I-
to keep both.
Well, I just, you know, the words that excite me are curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking. I mean, the old model of education was cram these kids full of facts and they'll be educated. And how do we shift that to this idea that, no, we're just not teaching them facts, we're trying to teach them how to think. So that excites me, that.
Yep. Other thoughts, impressions about growth? Otherwise, we'll move on to goal 2.
I like how it laid out.
Okay, let's go on to
I covered it really nicely.
Let's go on to goal 2 then. So goal 2 is communication. So this is a large piece of feedback that I think, whether it was the student groups, whether it was the staff group, whether it was the community group, communication was a common theme that came up. And the good thing, and I think a testament to everybody in this district, is communication didn't come up as necessarily a deficit every single time. There certainly were some feedback where people were looking for more or different or a variety, but there was also feedback where people were appreciative of communication and how the district has attempted or tried to communicate. But I do think that this, to me, it was loud and clear that this is what our stakeholders really want us to keep as a front burner issue. So where we would start with this is Paynesville Area Schools recognizes the importance of clear, concise, and transparent communication for all stakeholders. The district shall foster multi-mode communication to engage all community members, students, and parents on school district-related issues. So this is a comprehensive communication goal. It doesn't just pertain to the actions of the school board. It's not just about when we need to go out for that operating referendum. This needs to be something that is a commitment to communication, and it's a commitment to communication down to the transportation and school bus level, all the way up through the classroom level, all the way up through the Board of Education, and it needs to be throughout all pieces of our school district. Thoughts or questions or concerns with communication goal?
I thought it was a great goal.
Yep.
Okay.
And you could hear it when we listened to people.
Yes. And to be quite honest with you, I mean, it is helpful to have this as a goal because it does require it then to be immediately right in front of everybody. Because when you're in something, and Maggie, I think you've mentioned this over and over, when you're in the middle of it, when you're involved in it, you feel like you're communicating too much. When the reality is, for people that are on the outside looking for information, you're only communicating a fraction of what you really need to. So it
It's like what, eight to 10 times somebody needs to hear a message before it resonates on them.
Okay, third one, the third one that came up, there was, obviously a little bit of this was touched on with the whole staff piece and staff input, but this one was also more prevalent in the community. Financial allocation and fiscal stewardship. Paynesville area schools recognizes fiscal resources are finite. Resources will be allocated to fulfill goals and objective of the strategic plan in accordance with all relevant state and federal statute and rules. Additionally, PAS strives to reinvent service delivery models to maximize the district's return on investment. And again, this is some of the feedback with fiscal stewardship was absolutely positive, and the community is very appreciative of where the district is at financially. But at the same time, I think there's some others that have some level of concern, and so I think this would be something that would be good to keep as a front burner issue. I do think the other thing that while fiscal stewardship and whether it's financial crisis or financial challenges, they can very quickly have a negative connotation to them. I do believe that we just have to view those fiscal issues as opportunities to be able to evolve services and to maybe have them be next generation services. And that's really what the purpose of this is. It's not simply as black and white as we're going to abide by our 12.5% fund balance policy, but it's also about how do you leverage change and leverage improving and reimagining what we're doing through fiscal tools, which I think is a real possibility.
I think genuinely implementing the communication goal will help mitigate the issues that come up if there are, fiscal issues or challenges. If we're in good communication, it's not a surprise, they understand, the different funds, and so I think that's key. I mean, we'll see less issues, I think, by really fulfilling.
If you're looking at the business aspect, last sentence really hits on there for maximizing the return on investment.
Yeah.
I think that's, it comes across very positive. And it's something we should have in front of us, because I think that's basically one of our responsibilities here at the school board, and it lays in our laps, so.
Okay, so the fourth one there, and I put a little bit of a comment on here because so originally there was a kind of this theme of student supports, and that it can look in a variety of different ways, or it looks a variety of different ways. I originally was thinking that might be a fourth goal. The more I thought about it, as I was spinning it around in my head, I actually see that element actually going back and supporting goal 1.
Absolutely.
With the wellness approach. That wellness approach is gonna be grounded in a scaffold approach to support services. So I personally, I almost think that this fourth goal as written just needs to be deleted, because it's gonna be in the strategies and action steps associated with goal 1.
The only thing that I see that potentially could be expanded to this or added somewhere is the commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice work. A lot of this is obviously focused particularly on a student, but some of that growth when it comes to, from everything from policy to where we're doing our professional development, is there a place that can fit in where there's a specific call out to that work?
But I thought it was in number 1.
So that's my question, Maggie, is I think when you look at this wellness approach to number 1, now remember, growth in number 1 is student and staff. It's a comprehensive approach, but I think all of these need to be grounded in a lens of equity. And can we incorporate what you're just referencing in?
Right, either it's a lens that's specifically called out, like with that, otherwise it can get lost.
Yep.
I mean, that has to be, I think, a primary goal and awareness for us to continue to move forward in a diverse world, like we have to be.
Okay,
Cause it feels kind of hidden, I mean, I know it's in there, but.
yep. Okay.
That's just my recommendation.
All right. other thoughts? So just going back, goal 1. I honestly think if we're gonna do justice to this could be a 4 to 5 year commitment. There is a lot to it, and it is going to be layered, and it's going to be a large undertaking, worth every bit of effort, and I think it's the place we have to start. But just know that there's a huge commitment to that. Goal 2, I think, again, it's talking about communication process, and it's really systemic change is what's gonna need to take place in order to have goal 2 become second nature. So again, I think that might be a heavier lift again as well. Goal 3, I think is something that is very reasonable to get processes in place and stuff, and we're gonna be able to see some immediate impacts on something like that. So with that being said, is the board feeling like those 3 overarching goals would be enough
Yes.
to guide and focus? Or are we committed that we need a 4th goal?
No,
I think
I
it's
think we
good.
should stay with where we're at, and it should be, but what gets me is it's fluid.
Yes,
I would like to see it every month, and we see this move with us.
Yep.
Issues that Maggie has become more specific. This isn't specific. Those are the things you said, we can kind of
yes,
move and flow with it.
yep.
And that's what I'm interested in.
Okay, so I'll come back to that because I wanna talk about what your role is gonna be every month at the end of this. But so hold that thought and we're gonna get back to that one. So then the rest of this, when we start talking about strategies and tactics, the rest of this don't look at, it's just getting started. This is actually what admin team tomorrow is going to be working on. They are going to be working on fine tuning and getting these laid out as far as specifically what are the strategies, and then for each strategy, what is the tactic or what is the actual course of action we're gonna engage in to try to move the needle on these things. But this will be the format that you're gonna become familiar with. You'll see strategy, you'll see action steps. For every action step, you're gonna see a tentative start date. You're gonna see an ideal completion date, and then what resources we're gonna need. Those could be time, they could be personnel, they could be dollars and cents. It could be outside consulting from an area expert that we know, you name it. It can really be whatever is unique to that. And then we will identify a person or body that is responsible and gonna be held accountable for this. So for instance, one I can share with you, if you go down to goal 3, the financial allocation. A strategy is going to be implement appropriate fund balance expectations for the district. There's gonna be some action steps. When I come down to accountable for progress, that is most likely going to be the superintendent and Board of Education. So Board of Education, you are going to be on here and you are going to specifically be asked to be accountable for certain components of this, okay?
Yep.
So now let's get back to Bruce's question with fluidity. So each month, you're gonna get basically the stoplight approach. It's gonna be red light, yellow light, green light. So red light is something that's just on our strategic plan. That is, work is starting. We may be researching something, we may be looking into some possibilities, but it's gonna be a red light item. Yellow light means that we're formulating an action, a course of action where we can actually implement something, and we're actually devising what that logistically is gonna look like. And then green light, that means that that is actually being implemented. And for each phase of these, everything that ends up on our stoplight is gonna be tied back to a goal, a strategy, and an action step. And you guys will be able to track this. The hope is that things are going to start on red light and you're gonna see them flow from yellow to green. And then you're probably gonna see more things pop up on red and they're gonna continue to flow. Sometimes you're gonna see some things that go from red to yellow and all of a sudden they're gonna go right back to red because we found out that this isn't something that we want to commit to. And so it may just end up on red and it may die on red. But that's how you're gonna monitor this on a monthly basis, okay? The only question that this board then would have to decide, I think it would be good at the business meeting every month, so the last meeting of every month, that the strategic plan be on that as old business, and you guys visit the stoplight, and we can have 10-minute conversation just updating where things are at.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
First of all, I love this. The question is how, so like a lot of it is based on the action it's completed, resources needed. How do we know that we're doing well in it or improving?
Okay.
Versus like it just completed, we checked this list.
So Maggie, I'm glad you asked that, because that's the other piece to this. When you look at this, when you look this over, some people will say, well, Matt, we're never gonna know if we're successful because we don't know where we're starting, we don't know where we're going. That is inherent to all of this, is we are going to need to, in a lot of this district, and not, I'm not singling this district out, but a lot of districts have not approached growth as a holistic model. So the first thing that we're gonna have to do in order to really get serious about how are we doing on these things, we have to come up with what those tools are gonna look like and actually develop some benchmark or some baseline data to say, okay, this is where we're starting. And then from there, that evaluation piece is going to be just a natural part of all of this.
Who's gonna help you do those metrics and evaluations? Because if you need help, there might be a committee that might wanna.
Yeah, so actually,
So fun.
there's an organization called Sourcewell.
Okay, so you have, perfect.
So, but we're gonna need, there's gonna be plenty of local work that's gonna need to happen with those too. But, yeah, Sourcewell has a educator that has worked at the university level and a couple of Department of Educations that they're actual trained as a survey writer. And there's an art to writing assessments and surveys to actually get to assess what you actually want to assess. I'm not very good at it. And so I'm really excited to be able to work with them to be able to say, okay, these are when we talk about intellectual wellness, these are the things we want to be able to measure. Now let's sit down and talk about how can we come up with some quantitative tools to measure that. And of course, all of these things are all gonna also have qualitative data as well, but it's nice to have some quantitative data with it as well.
I think
Okay?
it's smart to outsource that, honestly, because like you said, it is a tricky thing to
Yes,
do.
yes.
Okay, I just have one picky thing to go through.
Yeah, go ahead.
The mission statement, which we've had for I don't know how many years,
Yep.
goes back to some other thoughts. Would it be better to just say social and personal skills to be career and community ready? When we throw the word college in there, that's one avenue to being career ready, but there are other avenues which we're not mentioning. Which again goes back to this idea that in the back of some people's minds is when you go to high school, you get ready to go to college. But we wanna emphasize the fact that no, that's not the only avenue, that there's several others. By leaving the word college in there,
I
are
don't
we,
see that it says that though.
pardon?
He says, no, he's removed the word college or add a bunch of other words, is what you're saying.
Well, either add in both tech training, or just say career, which includes college.
Yeah.
Why are we emphasizing college above all the other avenues?
I 100% agree with what you say, Rick. You could very easily just say, our mission is to prepare students with academic, social, and personal skills to be career and community ready.
Right.
Career implies and requires, if you're going into certain careers, that you're gonna need some skills, training, and potentially college, whether that be a undergrad or graduate degree, it includes all of that.
I'm just thinking that this goes back to a day when that seemed to be the one track when most people were
Yep.
thinking, and
Now's the time, if you wanna modify it, now's the time to do it, so
you disagree, Bruce? You think?
I have a different interpretation of college. I've always included the VOTEX, cause they don't call them vocational schools anymore. They call them.
There's still other avenues, but
There's other avenues
yeah.
in VOTEC
Yeah.
and just colleges.
Yeah,
the military is an
but
avenue.
it says that you've got a career, the college and the educational part you can continue with, and to be community ready.
But
I don't know that it
as
excludes
they're
other things.
saying, if you're coming out of high school, want to be a doctor, being career ready means going to college. if you coming out of school and you wanna be an auto mechanic, it does not require any level of college. You can go to the local shop and just train underneath them and become a mechanic.
Yeah,
So your career ready encompasses many avenues, sort of like you said, military. You know, go to the military to be career ready.
yeah,
So being career ready does not require you to be college ready. So is there a purpose to have?
I'll make note of it.
Yeah,
Everyone around the table,
Take a
keep
bigger discussion, cause I
Yeah.
think,
keep thinking about it. We'll come back, we'll circle back and we'll talk more about it, okay? But I'll make note of it and it'll come back on the draft that you see next time, okay? Any other questions on strategic plan?
I liked it. Short,
yeah,
to the point, yet fluid,
and functional.
yet it's not gonna be something we staple together and throw in the back shelf of your office, and then someday if we have another superintendent, the first thing he says is, what does that strategic plan mean?
Right.
Something that we're using, cause that came up, what does that mean? Well, we worked really hard on that, and we three were in on that. It was like, it was a shelf piece.
I think it also helps, like, as we are gonna go through some budget things, it allows us to say yes or no to things, cause if it doesn't align, I mean, we have to ask everything, what are we doing and does it align with? If it doesn't, we should question why we're doing it.
And that will be the beauty of the decision-making
Right.
process is it will become second nature
Yes.
to how does this align to our strategic plan? And if it aligns to our strategic plan, let's give it more consideration and thought and let's iron it out and figure out a way to make it happen. If it doesn't align with our strategic plan, then we have other priorities and limited resources that we need to probably focus elsewhere. Yep.
Have the faculty and staff all seen this and what is their?
Nope. So the next step with this, as I said, is admin's gonna
Okay,
flush
admin.
through this tomorrow. And then once we get everything that has more meat to it, then the next step is to get out to all employees and to get out to all the community members that participate in a session. And then take their input and feedback and then bring it back to you guys again. And fine tune it and then we'll be ready to get a final version. Okay? Can I just jump to the next one? Shared services, really quickly, I know we're running long here and I appreciate your patience. So shared services, I just want to give a heads up that BBE would like to have another discussion. Right now, we're sharing business services. I think the piece that the natural next step to that is potentially having one person do payroll for both school districts. I believe that would be a Paynesville employee that would be doing that. So I think that's something that we would need to talk with BBE about. I think there'd be some real benefits for both districts to look at that. And I think there's some other components where we have some possibilities coming up in the future that potentially we could look at sharing services rather than each district going out and purchasing them independently. I think we're to the point where it would be good to maybe get a couple of board members to be able to go and meet. A couple board members from BBE, superintendent from BBE and myself would also be part of that meeting. The last time we did this, I believe, Bruce, it was you and Mark that did that. So, I guess I'm just curious. Thomas, I would like you to be involved in that.
Yep.
If there's another board member that would be willing to be part of that conversation. Right now, Patrick and I have tentatively put some time on our schedule for January 20th, just so we had a placeholder. I think he had a board meeting on Monday and obviously we're here tonight. I don't know if that date works for them, but that was the date he and I threw on our calendars.
So I'd go if nobody else wanted to, but again, I would like to say that somebody else hasn't been there should go. So I think it's a really important thing. I worry about the future when we're competing against schools that are 2,000 kids. Between the two of us, we're there, right?
Maggie, do you have some interest?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
What time are you?
Any others? We can certainly have 3 board members.
I'd be interested.
Rick?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so how about if Thomas, Maggie and Rick would be part of that?
I'm really interested too, but I really prefer that someone with more business acumen be there.
So right now I have a,
Or better than mine, but I'll be interested in what happens.
I have a 4 o'clock and it would be a Zoom meeting is what it would be. So can I just confirm that before I put it on the calendar and send it out to the three of you? I will,
4 o'clock on the 20th.
4 o'clock on the 20th is what we tentatively have held on our calendars. And again, it would be a Zoom meeting. You would
Placeholder of mine.
not need to,
It
travel in.
changes, but at least I'll have a placeholder.
and then from there, after we visit with them, we can, then the next question is, the admin team here really needs to have a better understanding of what those shared services are. So we can then put together logistically, how do we operate with that shared model, in place? An example of that is like with the shared business manager. Well, when the business manager came in that shared role, the other roles in that district office changed slightly. And obviously, whatever we're gonna be sharing services, it's gonna have a ripple effect and we're gonna have to figure out how that works locally, so.
I think it's great.
Okay, and there'll be more information moving forward, as that conversation goes. I think realistically, sitting here, meeting the first time in January, probably might have another meeting in, February, but I think by the end of February, we'll know if it's something that is credible and we can logistically do it, or if it just doesn't make any sense. So that's kind of the timeline we're looking at. So you're probably looking at 2 meetings. Okay? Request for information.
You wanna change that facilitator? No offense. But,
No, I saw the,
Oh, I apologize for that.
yeah, anybody, have any topics they can discuss or any additional? Oh, all right. Take it, yeah, there's a lot of information today. Thank you, everybody.